I feel like it's like that whole Renaissance man thing where it's like I'm a poet, I've been to war, I've done a little bit of everything. I preached for a little while, I've been an atheist, I've done I've run the gamut of experiences, or I've tried to at least, finding whatever truth is. And I just kind of let passion lead, and that's why I'm not financially like a powerhouse, but I've done a lot of cool things, so I think that's more valuable.
Like every good human, right? Like you have to live the entire experience. I think I don't trust a believer who's never been an atheist, and I don't trust an atheist who's never been a believer, you know? Is that much of it? That's not much of a change for you, right? My name is Kerry Kite. I used to load bombs in the Air Force, and now I'm a writer, a filmmaker, and an entrepreneur. Through using the post 9/11 GI Bill to go to college, working hourly jobs to pay the bills, and freelancing my way into a career, I've studied what it takes to successfully transition from service to civilian, and that study has become a conversation. On this podcast, I speak to other veterans, successful artists, and entrepreneurs about their transition, what they did well, where they failed, what they learned, and most importantly, how they applied their skills. Episode 165 features the wild man himself, my good friend Stan Lake, about Toad in a Glass Jar, the latest from Dead Reckoning Collective, a poetry collection that talks about war, life, memoir, and the wild, wild nature of this beautiful world. Well, this is Veteran Made. Our merch store is live at store.veteranmadeproductions.com. Grab hats, t-shirts, and hoodies in both performance and tri-blend cotton fabrics. Use code VM-5OFF for 5% off your purchase. Veteran Made is also sponsored by GoPills, a military-grade nootropic that contributes to brain health over time. Use code VM15 at checkout for 15% off. I get my collagen protein from Bub's Naturals, where you can use code VETERANMADE, all one word, at checkout for 20% off your order. We're also proud to partner with True Made Foods, which makes condiments free from added sugar and sweetened with real foods. Use code VET at checkout for 15% off. We love socks in this house. I get my wife new socks every Christmas. More importantly, we love American-grown and made socks. Use code VETERANMADE15 at rucksocks.com for 15% off. And lastly, I end my day with Rack Out from Bravo Actual to maintain quality sleep, resulting in a well-rested body and mind. Use code VETERANMADE with a space between the words at checkout for 15% off your order. Enjoy the episode. All right, we are live. Good afternoon from the great state of Ohio for me. Good afternoon from the great state of North Carolina, right?
Oh, yeah.
Stan Lake, welcome to Veteran Made, man.
Hey, man, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Dude, I'm stoked. I always love it when I have a friend on the podcast, somebody that I've met in real life, somebody whose hand I've shook, who I've hugged, who we've
next to each other.
We've slept and snored next to each other. Sat around campfires talking about books and life and all kinds of good stuff last year at the RTB for Patrol Base Abate Book Club. So yeah, man, it's good to see your face.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Yeah, it's funny because I think we talked about this then, like it was coming out. This book was supposed to be coming out last year, so here we are.
Yeah, dude, it's all good. Yeah, there was a handful of Dead Reckoning authors there. Obviously, those two organizations are close, and we're involved with both. And yeah, I think there's a couple of authors that were there that are going to be on hopefully this fall or at least like early next year. So yeah. You and a couple others that I was talking to, like, oh man, we're going to record soon. Let's do it. Here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Well, yeah. One kid later for me, it's funny. It feels like yesterday. That trip feels like yesterday. And like 10 years ago at the same time. It's kind of weird how that stuff goes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, you really need no introduction, but if you could just give us a primer on who you are and where and when you served, and then we'll dive into Toad in a Glass Jar.
Yeah. I'm Stan Lake. I'm from North Carolina. I joined the North Carolina Army National Guard September 5th, 2001 as a multiple launch rocket specialist. And then the next week, 9/11 happened, and it kind of altered the course of, everything that came next for me. But most of my life, I've been pretty much like this weirdo wildlife enthusiast guy. So I've spent a number of years as a wildlife photographer, kind of like an amateur filmmaker, and writing has been kind of a through line through all of it. So if you're on social media, you've seen me as that weird dude called Catching Creation, which was another career that I did years ago, where I traveled the country and spoke to kids and whatnot in churches and schools using animals. So I have a lot of background. So it's kind of like, we'll just get into it.
Yeah. Like, I don't know obviously you just gave us a description, but it's like, I don't know, you kind of have like a gonzo feel to you. Is that accurate? Would you?
I feel like it's like that whole Renaissance man thing where it's like I'm a poet. I've been to war. I've done a little bit of everything. I preached for a little while. I've been an atheist. I've done kind of. I've run the gamut of experiences, or I've tried to at least finding whatever truth is, and I just kind of let passion lead, and that's why I'm not financially like a powerhouse, but I've done a lot of cool things, so I think that's more valuable.
Like every good human, right? Like you have to live the entire experience. I think I don't trust a believer who's never been an atheist, and I don't trust an atheist who's never been a believer, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely concur there as well.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, I mean, let's chat 9/11 a little bit because you wrote a poem about it, and you and your brother, is it your actual brother from the poem? It wasn't. It's like your blood brother.
Uh, I don't remember the poem offhand, but I did serve with my actual brother. He enlisted. He turned 17 on September 10th, and so September he'd already planned to enlist when he turned 17. We're a year apart, so I
Yeah,
enlisted September 5th. He enlisted like September 12th or whatever, whenever he was able to get back in with the recruiter. Um, yeah, and then we were in the same National Guard unit. I was a 13 Mike. He was a 13 Papa, which is basically I shot the rockets. He told us where to shoot them. And as far as when we were doing guard stuff, and then when we deployed, he and I were in different platoons. I was in 3 out of the 4 platoons in our company throughout the course of that deployment, and my brother was in the one that they wouldn't let me go into because he was in it. So we could never be on the same mission. Like when I did convoy security in the gun trucks, I wasn't allowed to go a third platoon, just in case I'd have to be on his convoy, and we couldn't stay in the same barracks and things like that. But I got to see him a lot. It was funny. Like in country, we'd pass. I'd see him going north when I'm coming south, or we'd end up at LSA Anaconda or BIOP or somewhere together at the same time and kind of talk or whatever. But yeah, it was weird having my little brother with me on that deployment.
yeah. Yeah. So the poem I'm looking at here, I think it's a digital copy that I have, and I think this will be pre-order still next week when this goes live. I don't know if folks will be able to have it in hand yet. I mean, I ordered my physical copy, but Keith gave me a digital copy too to read before this. But yeah, 1 year younger, page 48 is the poem. It was really interesting, kind of the way that you the way that you talked about it. Like you talked about, you know, you said your brother's 1 year younger.
Yeah, yeah,
He's
we
one
were.
year younger. Talks about your dad almost serving and your uncle sure did. But like 9/11 doesn't come up a ton on the podcast, mainly because this isn't like a service stories podcast, as you know. But every once in a while, it happens like this where it makes for an interesting sort of anecdote to open with. And because you did write one of the poems about it, I am curious, like, um, what was that experience like for? And there's another poem you wrote in here too about just like being in the National Guard and not necessarily expecting what was like coming down the pike. So like as a National Guardsman, like what was it like to enlist and assume that you were going to do one thing and then get forced into doing something else?
Yeah. It's funny because I chose a combat MOS or combat arms MOS thinking if anything ever did happen, I wanted to do something cool. I didn't want to just have like a practical, applicable skill afterwards. I wanted to blow shit up or whatever, And so um, it was interesting. So knowing that going into it, but it didn't seem like it would actually happen. I distinctly remember coming home from the MEP station with my recruiter and being like, 2 weeks in the summer, 1 weekend a month. This is going to be easy money. We've not been at war since the Gulf War, and that wasn't even a real war. Like, so, we're 20 years removed or 30 years removed from an actual like combat engagement. This is going to be great. And then literally the next week, 9/11 happened. After that, it kind of set the tone. My training got more serious. I tried to understand that, like, I saw the writing on the wall, even in basic training. Like, I knew this is going to last longer than it probably should. And like the drill sergeants are screaming that they're not going to just waste, regular Army guys. They're going to send all of us National Guard guys. And it turned out to be true.
Yeah.
But it was funny, we got back to my unit. We just prepared like we were an artillery unit, even though that wasn't really a practical, conventional thing for Iraq at least. but we did all that. I got good at that MOS, and it was like wars and rumors of wars the whole time. We did like QRF mission, where we trained to do riot control, uh, and then we did some hurricane stuff and some weather stuff, as far as that's what the National Guard kind of does.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just
in terms of the feeling, like you said, right? Like if something were to pop off, I want to do something cool and like blow shit up. Like when something did pop off, like did that feeling come true for you? Like did you have that like, all right, this is what I said, so like this is what's happening, I'm into it?
it was yes and no. It was more like, oh shit, like what have I done, but like it's gonna get real quick. I remember like running a lot. Like I increased, just I don't know. I was reframed kind of how I was looking at it. So I would run thinking I might have to be in better. I mean, just the best shape, because this is now like more than just college money. It was something that was going to be serious, and there was an ominous feeling, but there was also like a lot of pride. I mean, at the time, it was freedom fries and flags everywhere, and just everybody was like on point. And so it's kind of a funny dissonant thing with, I think, the GWAT generation too, with maybe the other veteran generations, where it's like we got thanked for showing up, like so it was these accolades, and I'd never done anything. So it was a weird season. But the inverse of that is I was in punk and hardcore bands at the time, like lyrically writing lyrics about or anti-war, anti-establishment stuff. So again, like for me, and Keith kind of made fun of me during the process of this book, but like dissonance is a through line throughout everything, and I can't escape that kind of the static of it. Um, and so that's how I sum up most of my experience, where it's like I'm super proud of serving. I'm still conflicted about how, where, and why I served, and but I don't want to trade it, but also I don't think we should have been there. It's this weird kind of back and forth with how I live with that.
Yeah, I wrote two words at the top of my notes here as I was reading the book, which was like, and it seemed like it was the theme for me from my perspective rather, which was like integration and disintegration. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is just like those are the two words that were, I don't even want to say in conflict with each other as I was reading this, but more that were like they're dancing with each other, right? And I think that's what you're describing. I mean, in the GWAT generation, we are different. Yes, for the reason that you stated, like the American society and culture was more supportive of us from the outset than they were of I would say any generation going back until World War II. But there's also that like we are an interesting bunch of people. We got some punk rock sensibilities, right? People like it, sort of expect that everybody in the military is, right of center and Republican and voted for Bush and, like wanted to be going to do these things. And then as the last 20 plus years have unfolded, like we've all realized like, hey, no, we're just actually a bunch of like really interesting people with a bunch of diverse perspectives who have a commitment to our commitments and have a commitment to duty. And we're able to hold those two competing truths, which is definitely something that I got reading this book.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how too, like culturally, it seems like the loudest patriots, and I use that term loosely, but it's like they kind of use us with this narrative of like we're all the same, like you said, right of center, whatever. And politically, it doesn't matter, right? Like I I think most of us don't think that doesn't factor in most of the time for many of us when you're already in. I think those
Totally.
are things you have time to think about when you get out, or other people are thinking about while you're in. As cliche as it is, but it's the guys to your left and right. I mean, that's what it's always about, or your teammates. Um, yeah, so I don't know. I don't get bogged down by some of that stuff, but it was interesting, like wanting to participate in a war and at the same time, like not wanting to go to this one. It's like I wanted to choose my war.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be
Yeah,
nice? But yeah, I mean, that isn't to say that like, you know, I don't even say that like it's not political because I agree with you. Like, to a certain extent, who cares, right? Like some of that stuff does matter, but it also doesn't mean that people aren't right of center. Or, I mean, I always say it on the podcast, like I defy anybody to try to discover what my political beliefs are because they're all over the place, right? Like I'm
same.
right of center on some things, left of center on some things. I talk to everyone, right? I may have voted for Bush. You don't know that. Who cares, right? Like,
Yeah,
and just because you vote for somebody doesn't mean you agree with everything, right? Like, and those are the pieces that both matter and don't matter. Back to those competing truths that we hold in our heads, right? But like you brought a lot of really interesting things with you to service. What was writing one of those things? Obviously, you were in punk and hardcore bands at the time, so you were writing lyrics. When did that start for you? Is that something that you brought with you, or is it something that you honed in the military?
I definitely started writing poetry as a way to kind of process early adolescence. So I was writing it in like middle school. I mean, they were really bad, but I had a couple friends that we would bounce stuff back and forth. And then when I started getting in bands early high school, all of my lyrics started out as like weird scrawling poems on the back of a receipt or something, and would just get an idea and write it. And then I would always just turn those poems into lyrics. And hardcore, and it's funny, I even mentioned this to someone else. Like, I think the cadence of my poems is probably like weird to a lot of people in some sense, or at least it was while we were working through the edits, because I'm hearing like certain cadences from hardcore music or different things in my mind when I'm phrasing things, but that's not a normal thought pattern for most people. So I had to kind of dial some of that stuff back in. But yeah, like writing has always been a huge part of my life. Even before we deployed, I got in an article, like my first article that I ever got published in a national magazine was about frogs. And I have it framed on my wall. I did that before that deployment. And then afterwards I was writing, natural history stuff for our local herpetology society newsletter and different things. So I've always aspired, as a writer, and just learned over the years that aspiring is bullshit. You got to get after it and just keep doing it, whatever that looks like. Because I think if you're writing, you're a writer, and I've had to take that to heart. So, but yeah, writing has always been a huge part of. I think that's like my first love. It's my creative through line that I always kind of fall back on one way or another.
Yeah, I want to come back to that, but you mentioned the editing, so I'd love to jump into that now. And obviously, did Keith edited this, right?
Yeah, Keith Dow did the editing for this, and it was fun, man. Like he really brought the best out in these, and we probably, as many poems as are in this book, we probably threw away like 50 or 60. I mean, I think I turned in like a 200-page book, and we whittled it down to like 140 or something like that. So
Yeah, yeah, and obviously Keith has a wide, obviously he's a friend of both of ours, so I know that he has a wide range of interests in music, and probably would understand some of those cadences, right, that you were talking about, like as you're hearing. But you mentioned that you guys dialed it back. So, like, what was that process like for you to maybe let go of some of those things? Was it difficult for you? And what was it like to work with Keith as he was trying to help you whittle this down and define it in a more specific way?
yeah, I think the beauty of this process for me was um, had we have tackled it closer to when I submitted the original manuscript, because I submitted this in March of 2023. So it's taken a long time to get it to the finish line, between other projects of theirs and whatever else. But I think had we have started it then, I would have been maybe more like closed fist about like keeping more of the things in there. By the time we got around to editing it, I'm not gonna say I was over it, but I was saying I'm ready to move this forward, and I wasn't as emotionally attached to every single piece of this thing, if that makes sense. So it was easier to edit and take constructive criticism since we waited longer. And I think I got a better end product out of it because we did wait, and because I was a little bit further removed from, like it was easier to kill my darlings, so to speak, as far as to do that.
Why? Like, what was it about the time? Was it the time itself, or was it things that happened to you during that time?
I think it was the time itself, and then looking back on some of them being like, uh, I don't want this in there anymore, or this doesn't apply anymore. It doesn't make sense anymore. And then Keith had a really good eye about things that were good but didn't fit the themes of the book. So some of the stuff they're still great poems, and we just got rid of them because we couldn't find like a place to put them in the book, and it didn't want to force fit them in there. And so that was part of it. And other stuff, I mean, like on a mechanical end, right? Like I think I told you this at the return to base thing, but it was, one of the first things Keith said to me was, "Hey man, is there a reason you're not using punctuation?" I'm like, "My brother, I didn't know I had to." So like I thought these were poems, so I had to learn like pretty quickly. Um, it's different for me. Like I can do it in writing articles, but for some reason with poetry, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I should add a comma there or whatever.
Well, I mean, you don't have to, right? So, like, I'm curious, like, if you had a different answer, right? If he would have, accepted it. But so what you gave him that answer, and you guys obviously did end up putting punctuation in there. Is it like those kind of mechanical, tactical things were like how did that unfold?
I mean, really, it's just it's. I Keith was almost
Steve Callahan didn't use any punctuation or any um I was going to say abbreviation, capitalization, right? Like
yeah.
he had a particular he obviously we know him too, and he's just stubborn as hell, and he's like, no, I'm not doing that.
I think it's a difference too. I mean, with mine, I think they needed it, right? I think because that helps establish that cadence, like that I wanted to force the cadence with punctuation. Callahan's book is great, and I noticed that first thing when I read it, I was like, "Son of a bitch!" But, but like, I think it's one of those things like you've got to know the rule to break the rule.
Yeah.
And truthfully, like I just didn't know what I didn't know, and I think it strengthened mine. But I don't think it would have been. I don't think it would have been bad without punctuation. It's just looking at it now, I prefer it this way, the way that we ended up with. And I trusted Keith. I think that was the main thing. Like he and I are very similar. We have similar backgrounds, through hardcore music scene or whatever else, and just different, mindsets. And so I really appreciated working with him. Like he could push back on stuff, and uh, and I trust that he's not doing it just to be a jerk. It's like no, he understands what he's looking at much better than I do. So I'm going to take that as wisdom and like there were a few things where I was like, no, we're gonna stick with this. I can't remember specifics on which ones, but there were a few that I'm like, no, we're not cutting this one, or you know, there were a few pushbacks, but mostly it was like pretty amicable and like it was just really cool to work with him. And again, I think it brought the best out of me because I was able to trust him to like, be honest with me.
Yeah, I mean that's the beautiful thing about poetry, and that's the beautiful thing about putting a collection together is like how do you do it, right? Whether it's on the page like we're describing here with capitalization or punctuation or structure or a format rather on the page, and then the format and structure of a collection. How did you guys land on? Did you have an idea of how you wanted this collection to be broken up into its component parts, or was that something that you and Keith worked on together? Because you mentioned throwing out 40 or 50 or so, and there are collections that this does have a flow, it does have an arc to it.
Yeah, it's funny, he mentioned in his editor's note that this was like the closest thing to a poetic memoir that he'd ever read. I didn't realize that when I wrote it. Like, you know what I mean? So that's funny that it ended up being something that I didn't intend. But looking back, I'm like, how could it not be? Yeah, I think I had an idea originally. The title for this thing was like, the working title originally was Death and Dissonance, which you can see those three lines throughout the book. Um, but I wrote the poem, I think somewhere kind of halfway through the process of A Toad in a Glass Jar. And I'm like, that's actually a much more appropriate title. And then when I started thinking about that and kind of how it lined up, like metaphorically and physically with kind of my life, um, I started breaking it down and I wanted this thing to look kind of like a field guide or like one of those, old school, science literature, whatever. And when I started thinking about it that way, I'm like, all right, how can I break this up into sections? Because it is kind of memoir-esque. Like, and I think that was, again, it was an evolution, like it was a process, but I think he and I kind of came to that together. But I started it, like I submitted it with distinct sections, in the headings and whatever else. And we kind of went back through and shuffled the poems, they weren't all where they were originally in the manuscript.
So did you submit it under the title Death and Dissonance with your own sections?
I can't remember if
Because
when I
I'd be
changed the
surprised.
title.
Because I'd be surprised. Like I just obviously knowing you and being friends and having followed you for a while, like it just makes sense that this is called Toad in a Glass Jar and has the nature, look, feel, and vibe to it, right? I'd be surprised if that was something that you didn't intend.
Yeah, I think by the time I finally got because that's a whole nother story in of itself. Like I think I worked on this thing before I submitted it to them. Like we had talked about it on the phone a couple times before I officially like submitted, because I went through all the same process. Even though like Keith and I were friends, I've been following them since they started. Um, I still went through all the rigors of getting accepted and all that. But I think I started this in 21 or 22. Like starting to collect the poems. And I think my working title for me on my desktop was Death and Dissonance. But I do think by the time I submitted it to them, it was a toad in a glass jar with like crude uh, title headings and whatever broken up. But I mean, I did it analog. Like I would print them out and I would like lay them out on my kitchen table. I would put them in stacks. Like, okay, these are about war. These are about childhood. These are about whatever. And then once I had kind of separate stacks, I was able to kind of physically see what it was looking like. I tried to give them as complete a manuscript as possible before we got started, thinking this will be a quick project. Hey, you guys just put your branding on it. I'm a rock star. We're gonna knock this thing out of the park. And like, turns out that's not how it works.
That is not how it works at all. Yeah, it's funny because you think about it from a timing standpoint. That's a big chunk of life, right? From like 2021 to 2025, like 4 years isn't nothing,
Right. I mean, and to think about it, like how much time, effort, energy went into it. It's a poetry book at the end of the day. Like I'm not dismissing it, but people have written novels in less time. So, and I mean, the book's been written forever. It's just been the process of getting it from point A to point B has been a fun thing. But again, like I said before, like I'm thankful that it took as long as it did, because I feel like we got the best out of it by kind of taking our time with it. And we edited it kind of punches and bunches. We would do a run through, then there might be like 6 weeks and we wouldn't touch it. And then we would do another run through. And so, I mean, it just was a process.
Yeah. So let's talk nature, because it's obviously you said writing's your first love, but nature is a big love, obviously, for you. And there's a theme here in the book. You've got a couple of poems in here, one about some toads in Iraq and one about some camel spiders in Iraq. And obviously anybody who's been downrange in the GWAT to the desert areas, camel spiders are a thing. But I loved, I don't know how to pronounce that. Is it Scania? Scania toads. I love that poem, man. Like, it was so fun because I'm not that guy, right? Yeah. Like, I just like, that's just not my thing. And so I'm reading this and I'm knowing you, and I'm like, oh man, there's a deployed experience, there's a combat experience, there's a wartime experience here. And then it's married to this like perceived other side of Stan that I know, but like, it just shows me kind of how integrated, right? Back to that theme that I wrote down at the top of my notes, like how integrated your life was at that point. Like, you're running around Iraq looking for toads.
Yeah, my call sign, my unit gave me a call sign, for the radio, and it was Critter Getter, because I don't even remember the story, but the rumor is that I jumped out of a moving Humvee to catch a lizard. It sounds like me. I don't remember the moment. But everybody says it happened early on, so I just take it as gospel because I was doing that. Like, it wasn't abnormal for me, so it doesn't stand out. But I spent the bulk of that deployment. Like, I bought at the time, like a top of the line documentary film camera, old mini DV cassette. I had a Canon GL1, which is like, I saw the Jackass guys using it. And so we would just film stuff between missions for morale boosting. And a lot of what I did is, at the time, I was an environmental biology major at UNCG. And I loved animals, obviously. And we were making these like spoof crocodile hunter documentaries before I left. So I was like, I'll just do that over here, And the Scania toads, I have a video. It's on YouTube, and I wrote about it in an article for Reptiles magazine. But I caught the only species of toad in Iraq. There's one. I have them in my basement now. Not those specific ones, but I found somebody selling them online. I'm like, I've got to have them. But it was just one of those moments where, like, I heard a toad calling, and I'm 7,000 miles from home, and I felt transported because it was like, hey, I know I'm at war. Like, I've got an M249 like on my back as I'm walking, and I'm hearing this. And like, oh man, there's no amount of sleep that I need right now after this mission that's going to stop me from like experiencing this right now. So
that's really cool because so many of us didn't get, like, you're when you're deployed, you're thinking about home, and you're thinking about the things that you would be doing, or the things that you want to be doing, or the things that you're looking forward to doing. It's pretty rare that you actually get to do that thing, and you got to do it on a deployment.
I was trying to, being a naturalist, like I have like one image left. Like, I burned, that's part of my story. I burned all my journals and all of my photos and everything after right before I got married, and a lot of it was like war stuff and whatever else. But I found a random Right in the Rain journal that escaped the flames, and it's got like a science sketch of one of the beetles and some like natural history notes. Because, like I said, at the time I was a biology major, I worked in a research lab studying bats. So like part of my job at the time was like sketching out pieces of insects from microscopes that bats were eating, like studying their diet. And so I was like, all right, I'll just do this over here. And the lab let me bring like a bat detector, which is like this thing that it's like a frequency thing that you can hear different frequencies in whatever the range they're in. You can tell what bats they are. So I was out there like, in the middle of the night, some nights like, what bats are out? And I was trying to find out. And I'd set out on like, if we were at Camp Arif John or some other base, I would watch the ants at night, like build nests, these harvester ants. We caught hedgehogs. I mean, that was just, I had to like dissociate and still feel human. Like there was like, I know we have serious stuff to do on missions, but if I had downtime, I was trying to be myself. I was trying to not think about like all the shit that happened as soon as we left whatever base or fob we were on. I just wanted to find animals and like make my buddies laugh. I mean, we made a whole documentary out of that called Hammer Down, like where I was just doing jackass shit to all my friends. So
yeah, I love it. Like I said, that's an experience that like most people don't really get on a deployment.
Yeah.
Where you get to be yourself and like and do some of the. I mean, you get to be yourself, but you know what I mean. Like, get to actually like do some of those things that you would do back home.
That's the beauty of also like we did convoys, right? Like, so we were, stationed in Kuwait, but like most of our missions were a couple weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks at a time, where we would bounce around to like every major and minor, base and fob in Iraq. So I got to see like, these natural history, but I also got to see like historic sites. Like, I think it was Camp Cedar. There's the Ziggurat Temple, like the birthplace of Abraham. We saw the burial place of Jonah, like, all these things that just I would have never seen in my life. I got to see either as we drove past on a mission, or if we got stuck at some base for a while, we could experience things around us. So it definitely was a blessing that we got to do all that for sure.
Yeah, it's like back to that. Like, I don't know what we're doing here or why we're here, but I am here and I get to see those things. And it's like finding those moments. I want to talk about the poem here in a sec where you wrote about qualifying your service, right? Like, everybody has a different experience in the military. Some people deployed, some people didn't. I deployed in a support capacity, never saw direct combat. But like, even when I'm talking to somebody like, oh man, you went to Afghanistan, what was it like? I'm like, I mean, it was one of the best experiences. I went twice. It was one of the best, two of the best experiences of my life, because the intersection of all those things, the conflict, the tension between all of those things, like it was, it was purpose, it was work, it was nothing kind of but those things. And then the release that you would get, I wasn't catching critters, but like working out or, watching movies on the morale drive or whatever. Like, there's just burned in memories that I have from certain movies that I watched for the first time when I was deployed or watched multiple times while I was deployed. And it's that odd combination of like good and bad feelings that we just kind of carry around. That is a unique experience.
I think it's interesting too, because you're probably never closer to people that were previously strangers, than on something like this, and they become lifelong friends. You also learn like how little you need to survive. I mean, as far as like all the distractions we have all the time. I mean, effectively, I lived out of a backpack for a year, and I was okay. Like, it was almost better when I had less.
Yeah.
And I think it puts everything in perspective. I've talked about it before, but it's like you have this weird, dangerous freedom. Like, you could die. I mean, we could die at any moment here, but like over there, it's very forced perspective, and it makes you want to be alive, or just makes you not care or be so afraid of death. I don't know. It's a weird, again, dissonance. Like, it's
yeah, there becomes like, it's like there's an intrigue there, right? Like, there's an interest there where you're like, oh man, I'm really close to something that, you're right, we are technically close to it at all times, but that forced perspective puts us in a position to say, like, I'm really close to this thing that I don't really want to be that close to it right now, because I've got a lot of life left to live, a lot of things I want to do, a lot of places I want to go. But that, again, it's back to that, just that integration and disintegration, that this strange combination of truths that are just sitting up here or in here. So yeah, the poem qualifying service, it's obviously become a theme for the GWAT generation over the course of the last 20 plus years, right? We've got people fighting on Instagram about whose ops were the blackest, and who was the most out of regs while they were serving and doing the coolest guy shit of all time. And we sort of watch people bicker back and forth on Instagram in certain segments of the community. But then we also we talked about it. All of us talked about it quite a bit last October at Return to Base. It's become a theme and something that some people don't like to talk about, and others do. You wrote about it here. Talk to us a little bit about that poem qualifying service and just the idea of I mean, you're writing through the idea of having to qualify your service, right? So like you were expressing it through poetry, but just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's funny, when you tell somebody you're a veteran, if I say I was in the National Guard, they're going to automatically think a certain thing. So like that poem, always have to qualify it with, I was in the Army, or I say I was in the Army, and then that sometimes feels like a weird stolen valor if I just say Army too. So I'm like, yeah, I was in the Army National Guard, but like I deployed to Iraq. You know what I mean? I actually did the thing. And it was funny because like people over the years, like I've had guys that I work with, and they'll be like, "Oh, you weren't airborne, or you weren't this, whatever." I'm like, I'm not trying to be the best at training. Like they never deployed, and it's not a measuring thing. But if you want to measure, like like we did this other thing. I didn't go to cool training, but like I got sent with a bunch of dum-dums that didn't know what they were doing to a foreign country. That was kind of cool, With the public, it's like if I tell people, everybody has certain perceptions. I say I was a machine gunner on a gun truck, they think, well, I'm just out there mowing people down. I never pulled my trigger. You know what I mean? Like I never had to fire on anybody. There were some sketchy moments. I had to do other things, but I don't have that thing. And I think it's what we talked about at Patrol Base Abate, where it's like, it boils back to that I was just mentality. I think so many of us want to qualify our service and be like, I was just this or I was just that, but I wasn't one of you guys, you know what I mean, that did whatever you did. And I think that's like a false narrative that a lot of us have, or false humility, or whatever it is, where it's like, even those guys, I've talked to, MARSOC guys or Delta guys or whoever, and they always were like, yeah, but I wasn't this guy. I didn't have a Medal of Honor. I didn't do this other thing. Like,
We all do it.
Wrestle with it. It's like, even after Iraq, I'm like, yeah, but I didn't go to Afghanistan. And most of my friends did both. It's like, it's never enough.
Yeah. Yeah. It puts us in this weird position when we're talking to each other. I think we're pretty good about it, right? Like at that night at the campfire where we were talking about, I was just, right? Like that was an incredible conversation, and we were all in a great headspace to be having that conversation with each other. But we're in this weird position when we're talking to people who haven't served, right? It's like, for me, to use the framework you were just using, like I was in the Air Force, but I deployed to Afghanistan twice, but it was only Bagram, and I didn't leave the wire. It didn't see direct combat, but I did load bombs. It's like, and people are just like, whoa, that's cool. Oh, wait. And then you're like defending yourself as well as kind of being like, no, it's this weird, just discomfort that we feel. And it's like, well, what, it's like back to that night we were talking about, it's like the idea of identity, right? Which has obviously become the topic du jour across the board in our culture. But it's like, it becomes so tricky because what do you identify with, and who do you identify as? And we're so tempted to identify with the things that we've done, or the uniform that we wore, or the beret that we wore, or the tab that we didn't get. And it's like, just,
Yeah. Well, there's the stratas of even deployment. If I tell you, I just say Iraq because I was there more than anywhere, but like technically my base was Camp Arif John Kuwait, which is like the most cushy base there is. But my clothes were there. We were on missions, 3/4 of the month, and we would come and wash our clothes, take a day off, and then turn right around and go back out for 2 or 3, 4 weeks, whatever. But if I tell you that I was at Arif John, you're going to automatically think, oh, you're just some pogue loser. I'm like, yeah, I was, but I also got to go do cool stuff in Iraq. So.
It's not, yeah, it's yes and it's not but
Right.
it's also but sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like this, yeah, we're like trying to triangulate that where we fit. And you talked about it in some of the poems like early in the book too, right? Like the idea of like longing for the war games that you were playing as a kid that, you know, most of us probably played as a kid. And you're like, wow, this isn't what I expected it to be when I was that little kid running around in the woods. It's better in so many ways, and it's also worse in so many ways. And then you're the one there experiencing it, and then thankfully, you know, you're able to actually bring life to those words and like put them on the page for us to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. So how your writing has been a through line for you, and you've obviously, so we've talked about um, music, we've talked about lyrics, we've talked about writing poetry, we've talked about throwing poetry out, but you mentioned a little bit of like research writing that you've done, writing that you've done for periodicals that are specific and topical. What's it like? How do you, not what's it like, how do you work across different disciplines for writing? Like, well, obviously the format changes and obviously specific kind of tactical things change for you, but like what stays the same for you? How do you approach writing for different media?
I think it's like knowing your audience. If I'm going to write, a real reptile specific thing for like a reptiles magazine, or I wrote something for an organization called the Orient Society a while ago. I come at it from a storyteller perspective, but I have enough, I guess, bona fides with science background where I can at least talk the language. So I approach it a little bit differently. I maybe add some Latin names or whatever to kind of lend a little credibility to that. But I think I approach most all of them the same way. I try to approach everything honestly, and again, that's probably cliche as well. But at the heart of everything, I'm a storyteller. Whether it's with writing an article or taking a photo or making a video, whatever. I'm trying to tell a story. I'm trying to communicate my truth to you. And I think if I can do that, if I can do it with a sense of authenticity and honesty, then I've achieved my goal. Right? Like I don't. I've not done any technical writing, so maybe there would be a difference there. But like, well, I mean, even with what I do for a living, like I work for the VA, like sometimes I've got to write letters to veterans, and it's like obviously there's a different approach that I can't be as familiar or whatever, in those. But by and large, I try to be honest, and I think that's the best thing I can say about it.
Do you think writing across these different disciplines like helps you in each of them?
Yeah, and I guess I don't even look at it as differences, right? Like for me, because I have so many intersecting things that I've done, it's all just like part of a bigger part of the same thing for me. So I don't even distinguish like certain things from each other, as dumb as that sounds. But like on the
Doesn't.
one hand, I could write an article about combat trauma, and the next I can write one about a lizard, and it's like I'm coming at it from the same place because it's me having that experience. Most of what I write is more of that like personal essay style. I think across the board for most of the different genres. Um, so there's not a lot of distinction other than just topics change.
So how do all these interests fit together for you now? Obviously, I see you putting animals up for sale on your Instagram story. You're constantly showing us your collections, and obviously you're doing that for fun, but you work at the VA. But like, so how do, like, you talk about all these different intersecting interests and all these different paths that you've been on in life that have kind of led you to where you are. How do they all fit together for Stan Lake right now?
It's like a chaotic mess. It's exhausting. It all fits together. The animal thing, uh, I've never not had animals. I have at my house a basement with terrariums that line the walls, and I've built most of them, so I get a lot of enjoyment and probably therapeutic value out of just like constructing these mini ecosystems. Sometimes I put animals in them. Sometimes I just leave them and let them grow. And that helps me kind of process through things. As far as the other stuff that I do, I mean, it's all kind of like a means to an end to tell a story. Uh, but yeah, working for the government, a whole nother layer of dissonance for me. Not a fan, but it pays the bills. I'm excited, to have lights on.
Yeah,
So,
always helpful. Always
yeah,
helpful. Yeah.
And music and everything too. I mean, it's always, I think a lot of it, again, even that storytelling, it's like it's like giving voice to things. I did vocals in hardcore bands, so I'm the jerk up there screaming, about some innocuous political thing or whatever. And I, again, they're all interconnected for me. It's all about storytelling at the end of the day.
Yeah, my favorite people in the world are people who have like the low hanging fruit to say like, oh, a wide range of interests. We were talking about this the other night with a group of parents and teachers. We went to a like a school, like guys running for school board here locally in our suburb, and a friend of ours brought like a small group of parents and teachers together to like talk to them and kind of not air grievances, but just have a conversation about kind of what we're looking for in the school system. And our kids are young. We've got a 5-year-old and a 3-month-old. We're there with like middle school parents and high school parents, and it was terrifying to be listening to these middle school parents and high school parents being like, man, these are the struggles that we have to look forward to. And then also thinking about the fact that in 10 years, 10 plus years, the struggles are going to be totally different for our kids, or at least the mechanics of them are going to be totally different with AI and technology and all these different things that kids are dealing with. But one thing we all kept coming back to was, when we live in the suburbs, and so everybody wants their kid to be, have a wide range of interests, right, and have like a diverse set of interests and be, kind of good at a lot of things, right, so they can get into a good college and get a good job and all these things. And my wife and I were talking, and some others were talking. We're like, no, that's actually not interesting. Like, that's not fun. Like, that's actually pretty boring. Like, be a person who has a couple of very specific interests and a couple of very specific things that you're good at or that you do as a hobby. And so for you, it's like working for the VA, writing poetry, singing in hardcore bands, collecting animals. Like, that's just, it's so cool to me. I went and shot a commercial years ago in Nashville, Tennessee, at Groon's Guitars. This guy, his last name is Groon. He's like he's like the Nashville guitar guy. He's got this beautiful collection of guitars, and we went and shot this awesome commercial. It was super fun. And he's like, hey, you guys want to come check something out? And we go to the back of his shop in his office, and he has hundreds of snakes, hundreds of them in, I guess, their terrariums. I don't know, reptiles like you do, but we like walked back and he like got a couple of them out. And I'm like, man, this guy is an elite guitar player and guitar supplier for all kinds of musicians. And he's obsessed with reptiles. Like, these are my people. I love it. Like, not because I'm interested in those specific things, but my people are people that have specific interests.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm sure there's a lot of guys like that too. I think for me, it's like I grew up in the Southeast, and the woods were pretty accessible. We grew up in a real small town, and my parents were divorced, so it's like my brother and sister and I just kind of were babysat by the woods, basically. And we would go out and catch box turtles and toads or whatever. And it was always encouraged. I had these like Southern storytellers, like a great uncle and my grandfather would tell all these stories, and there would always be snakes or things involved, and so it's just always intriguing to me. And it was never discouraged. Like, my mom will catch snakes. My mom will, plays golf all the time, and she'll send me pictures of her holding a black snake or a snapping turtle or something. So I'm thankful for the family that I have, for stuff like that. And so it never felt abnormal to me or something I'm seeking to have an interest in. It was just like, like, I like these animals. I want to know more about them. And then the more I learned, the more I was like, you can get poison dart frogs off the internet? Hell yeah. And so I would just, find ways to make things happen.
Yeah. My brother and I grew up in Southern California, just inland from Camp Pendleton. And then we moved to Ohio when I was like 13. And it's not a ton of snakes here in Ohio, but growing up in Southern California, we would be catching snakes all the time. Red racers, king snakes, right? Like there'd be rattlesnakes out there, and we'd go out with my dad and his friends and just like go out and grab these guys. And I remember I caught a king snake, brought it home, put it in a cage, I guess, terrarium, whatever the glass one is. And then I remember one time my stepmom, it was like a Saturday or something, my stepmom was like, Carrie, get out here. And I like went out to the kitchen, and the snake was like on the floor in the island. And she was like, you got to lock that thing. So I went and grabbed it and like put it back in and took it to school for show and tell. And, it like lunged at my arm or whatever. It's just like I don't know, brought back a lot of memories reading this and having this
I was that kid bringing, literally toads in like a Duke's mayonnaise jar or something like that, Mount Olive pickles. Like we would always put the stick in there and a handful of grass, and that's his home. He loves it there.
It was raining. I remember it was raining one night. My brother was in high school, so I was like probably 12, like turning 13. It was like right before we moved to Ohio. And it was raining, and we were driving through the hills in Southern California. It doesn't rain a ton there. And there's just frogs everywhere, going across the road. And so like my brother had like a beat up old red Toyota Tacoma. And he stopped the car. We got out, we grabbed it, and we put it in my stepmom's bathtub. And she got home later that night. Boys, like that's just the best. There's nothing better.
When I used to do programs for a living, I spoke at a pretty large church in Fort Lauderdale. And while we were there were a bunch of cane toads. They're an invasive species in Florida. And there's the one in my picture. If you've seen my like author picture, they get massive. And so I caught a bunch of them, put them in a bathtub in the hotel we were staying in, just like to keep them overnight because I was going to bring some of them home. But like if they were to come in to clean the room, I can only imagine like what they would have thought.
I love it. We got toad in a glass jar. And we got toad in a hotel bathtub. I love it.
Oh yeah.
All right, it is a Friday afternoon going into a holiday weekend. We're going to quick turn this episode out next week. I want to be respectful of your time. Stan, where can folks find you? Where can folks find the book? Where do you want to drive traffic?
Yeah, if you want to find all of my social media, all of my links, stanlakecreates.com. That kind of takes you everywhere. Catching Creation on Instagram. And then to get the book, Dead Reckoning Collective is where I would prefer you to buy it from, but technically Barnes & Noble, Amazon, everywhere that sells books will have it. But if you can buy it through Dead Reckoning, that would be awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll link all that stuff out, collab with you and DRC on Instagram. Stan, as you know, to end each episode of the podcast, I ask an open-ended question. What's on your heart and your mind for our community right now? Could be a piece of advice, something you want to get off your chest, or something you want to reiterate that we've talked about today. Stan, what's on your heart? What's on your mind?
I was anticipating this question and my mind is now gone blank. I think the most thing, what I'm learning, teaching I teach creative writing for veterans through a nonprofit called Veteran Creative Arts Program. And I think the power of telling our story, right? Like whether you're writing poems, whether you're writing articles, taking pictures, whatever it may be, I think there's power in telling our story. And I think the more of us can get together and build community around things like that, I think you'll see a lowering of like some of the bad mental health things that many in our community are suffering with. I think most of it is from lack of connection, lack of community. So my heart for the community, the way I like to give back, the way I just feel passionate is to try to keep people connected. And there's, again, telling them there's power in their story. I think what we've been a part of with Patrol Base Abate, being a part of groups like that, it's invaluable, right? Like finding other people that have also served and sharing that burden with one another because we're the only ones that get what we've gone through. So if I'm passionate about anything, I think it's that. It's just trying to build community in a real way at a very base level. We're just reaching out. You see somebody post something online, reach out and say, hey, what's up? Like, I think that's most of us are more alone than we'd like to admit. And I think it having somebody reach out or just small layers of community means the world to so many people. At least it does for me. So,
yeah, well said. I love it. And shout out to Worth Parker, who wrote the foreword to this and who I believe you do that class with, right?
Yeah, it's funny. The nonprofit that I guess like recruited me out of it or whatever was, we were in Worth's class. This is another organization,
okay, cool.
Not Worth's, but like his class is phenomenal. I'm taking his now. And I just finished my third session of the year with mine, 2 weeks ago. So both are great. Worth's is probably better if you want to get together. Like, if you want to be realistic, I'm just flying by the seat of my pants, and I mostly just like let people talk. I don't rein it in like he does because differences of approach. But like, yeah, it's great. Like I've learned a lot about a lot of people, and it's really built a strong community in both classes. So yeah,
I love it. Well, Stan, appreciate you. Appreciate your words. Appreciate the book. Appreciate your friendship, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man. We'll see you soon.
All right, bye.